question. I mean, obviously the bridge, we wanted to be pretty spectacular because it's pretty spectacular in the book. And
I love the bridge.
I mean, the bridge is miraculous, I think. That was probably the biggest challenge for production, to make sure that we got right. And it's interesting, the bridge is actually, there were 3 pieces of the bridge that are practical, and a lot of it, the interior of it, which this is a testament to our VFX team, is VFX. I was like, you guys aren't going to get any props for this because no one's going to know, because that's how good it is. So that's why I'm telling you all. So the bridge was a big one, and then in terms of Charlie Manx, you know, that was a collaboration between the book, myself, Zach, our first block director, Kari Skoglund, and Joel Harlow, who did the special effects makeup. And, you know, the big conversation that we had about it early on, and that the conversation that Joe and I had had, is that Charlie Manx is not, he's a man, first and foremost. So he's not actually a vampire in the way that we typically think about vampires. He doesn't have pointy ears. He's not non-human.
He's not upset by garlic.
Right. He can go out in the sun. So anything that looks horrific about him really comes from being 135 years old.
I suspect his breath is not very good.
That's probably
now Zach's breath is great, but I think that because the 19th century hygiene thing, you know, like, I mean, the only reason when he was a kid, the only reason Charlie Manx would have gone to a dentist was like for an amputation. You know, so they didn't really, so yeah.
Yeah, so the teeth are bad, but they're not fangs. They're 19th century, 135-year-old man teeth.
I think one of Charlie's biggest advantages over the heroes is he does have 135 years of experience. You know, he's good at not getting caught.
Yeah.
He's good at getting away with it. Well, you know, I don't know. I think you respond to who's got the passion. You know, who connects with the material and feels like they can do something exciting. I mean, and so in some ways the format is almost secondary. I do think that we're living in this really remarkable period of television and genre television, and you know, and horror. So much of horror depends on empathy. So much of it depends on compassion. You know, the way great horror works is you fall in love with some characters, and then you see them, you know, put through the ringer, you know, put through the meat grinder, sometimes literally. And on TV, you have 10 hours to fall in love with the character. You have so much more to explore. Whereas in a movie, you really only got a few minutes to start to care about someone before you moved on to Leatherface. You know, and so I kind of like that we have a little more room to breathe in a TV show. I think that that's special. And of course, you've got this. We're in this era when we can take risks in TV like you couldn't even imagine taking 10 years ago. Well, no. I mean, you know, I read Jami's pilot script probably about 2 years ago now.
I think so.
And I thought it was the best single episode of anything I had like ever read in my life. It was so. She has such a deft touch. She reveals so much in... No, I mean, I'm dead. It's not an ironic statement. She has such a deft touch. There were little things she was able to reveal in just like, you know, a paragraph or just a line of dialogue. And so then, after I read what she did, I wanted to be careful not to fuck it up. So I kind of tried not to get underfoot too much, and, you know, and to be available when she had questions, but then otherwise sort of cheer her on to tell her version of the story from the sidelines.
It's funny, I'll tell a quick story. Joe came to the table read for, I think, episode 2.
Yeah.
Episode 2. And I remember while we were doing the table read, this was on set in Rhode Island, he had the script and he had a pen in his hand. And I was sitting next to him, and he kept going. And I was like, oh my God, he hates it. What's happening? Having a panic attack. And then at the end of it, he said, Jami, I just have a couple of thoughts. And I was like, oh, he hates it. And then he was like, here, I think, you know, it would be great. Charlie Manx has an older way of speaking. Could he, instead of saying my child, say my joy? And I was like, Yes.
I
Yes,
was drawing
that.
smiley faces, and this was me drawing little smiley faces in the margin.
Yeah. So anyway, this is all a way of saying whenever I would hear from Joe, he's always been super generous and always had great suggestions, and we try to incorporate them unless they come in too late, and then sometimes the horse is out of the barn, but mostly. It really was about working closely with the director, Zach, and our special effects makeup guy, Joel Harlow, and Joe too. I was sending Joe pictures of Manx, again hoping that he'd be like awesome and not like go back to the drawing board, which you know, Joel Harlow really is a genius, and so I wasn't surprised that it was a pretty easy collaboration, and he just presented us. He's, I think, a fan of Joe's anyway too, so he just immediately was like, love the book. I'm like, yes, sign me up, and then the next day was like, here are 5 looks. What do you guys think? And you know, then it was really about making Zach comfortable and making sure that the makeup was something that he could, that wouldn't obscure his acting. And yeah, I don't know, it was a trip. I think that sense of dread permeates the whole book. And that's one of the, like, those are my favorite kinds of scares, is the kind of tension of what is on the other side of what's on the other end of the bridge. Where does this highway go? What's waiting for Daniel when he gets out of the car? And, you know, the book, I say all the time, one of the things I loved about it is it has a great sense of humor, and it also has a really kind of, it unfolds in a way that you're never ahead of it. And as the characters get kind of, as you learn more and more about the characters, you do, for me, you're like, the tension is ratcheted up, and so we wanted to be faithful to that.
For myself, I'm not above a good jump scare. You know, I think there's plenty of room for that. But they are kind of cheap and weak. I mean, if someone drops a stack of frying pans behind you, you're like, oh! But that's not like great horror. That's just a loud noise, you know? And I think you get more mileage out of suspense. And suspense is about one thing. It's about taking a character you care about and putting them out on a ledge 10 stories above the street, you know, to rescue a cat. And then they're crawling out to get the cat, and they get to it, and the cat scratches them in the face. And that's hard to look away from, and is a lot more interesting than just, you know, someone's walking down a dark hallway, and then the soundtrack goes, wah! Which, of course, is going to make you jump. But it's kind of gimmicky, kind of weak, a little weak.
I'll speak to that a little bit. I think that, you know, where I started from when I set out to adapt this book is a place of loving the book. And so my process, in terms of thinking about it and how we thought about it in the writer's room, has always been, how can we tell this story and get as much of the book actually into our show as we can. And as for those of you who have read the book, you know it jumps around in time, we're in different places, you know, it starts in the present but then goes back to the past, and then which is complicated for a television show, especially if you're trying to you know, you're trying to follow a main character, Vic McQueen. So most of the deviations that we've made from the book have been about showing more of the book, and they've all been decisions about how to manage the timelines and manage the characters in such a way that our actors can play them.
I misheard the question. I thought you said, does the TV show deviate from the book? And I thought you said, does the TV show have deviancy? And I was about to say, yeah. I mean, lots, I promise. You know, worse and worse by the episode, really.
Tune in.
Yeah, I mean, only very good people, very special people get to go to Christmasland. So that's really more about you. Well, I don't know that I have to be protective of the words. I mean, if NOS4A2 comes out as a huge hit, everyone loves it, it won't make a single word of my book better, you know? And if someone takes a story and makes like a bad film out of it or something like that, it won't really make a single word of my book worse. You know, I told my version of the story, and one of the reasons I tried not to be too much underfoot with Jami, as this is her version of the story. And I think in some ways that there are some themes in the book and some aspects of the characters that she was able to connect with more strongly than I could when I worked on the book. I'm very lucky she wanted to take it on.
I don't know how to talk about vampires generally, but I can talk about Charlie Manx a little bit. And one of the things that I think that I loved in the book and that we really explore in the show is Manx's connection to the Wraith, his car. And the car itself, this sounds kind of cliche, but it's really true. It is a character in the show. And there are moments in the show, just me watching the cuts come in, where I've thought to myself, the car is just as big of a villain in the show as Manx is, really.
I kind of hate mustache-twirling villains, I really believe that, everyone views themselves as the hero of their own story. And I do think in a weird, twisted way, you can look at the decisions Charlie has made and see how he would view himself. Because, in his mind, he's rescuing children from lives of suffering and unhappiness. And then as he takes them to Christmasland, he gradually drains all their hate and regret and sorrow and grief. All that comes out of them. And when Charlie is done with them, there's nothing left but happiness, innocence, and teeth. And I mean, in a way, when you think about childhood, you think shouldn't that be enough? I mean, happiness and innocence sounds great. The thing about a kid who is innocent, the thing about innocence, I think we over-idealize innocence in a lot of ways in our culture. Because an innocent child will rip the wings off a butterfly and laugh about it. Set fire to ants and have no idea that he's causing another living creature to suffer. It's our regrets, our sorrows, our guilt that makes us complete, functioning human beings. If you can't feel sorrow and regret, you're not an angel, you're a sociopath. And so I think that, Charlie has this vision of saving children and bringing them to a place of complete, never-ending happiness. And from a certain point of view, that does sound heroic, but when you get close to it, actually it's kind of monstrous.
And it also, allows him to live forever and stay young, so he, there's
Right,
another.
plus he's drafting off their spirits. I mean, in some basic way, he's using them to recharge. I do kind of feel like all the books except for The Fireman sort of take place in the same universe. And that, I sort of articulated an idea of the supernatural in NOS4A2 that I've revisited in other stories and will probably continue to revisit in the future. I don't know about a formal sequel in terms of in print, but we did talk about some stuff, some offshoots from the book that we might get into, that if we did get into, I would consider canon. But we can't say too much about it because that's so far downstream. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the best thing you could do is, you want to get the book, and you want to get copies, and you want to get copies for your friends because you're going to want to talk about it with them. Yeah. So, but then I think the best thing you could do is watch the show as it comes out and then pre-order the DVD. Because the thing is like the show is so fleeting, it's over and done, and you really almost want to be able to explore the scenes frame by frame. So that's how I would begin. Begin with multiple copies of the book and then move on to multiple copies of the DVD.
I don't think that either Vic or Charlie would consider the other one their nemesis. I think that they are both people who have extraordinary gifts that come with costs, and their gifts ultimately put them in conflict. But I don't think, just from a character standpoint, I don't think Charlie Manx thinks that Vic McQueen is his nemesis. I think he thinks that she is intriguing and potentially dangerous. And I think that Vic probably doesn't see Manx as her nemesis either. I think that she sees him as definitely dangerous. and someone she has to deal with.
I feel like Manx feels like there's one scenario where Vic could actually be of use to him, and if she can't be of use to him, she can be a speed bump.
She has an extraordinary gift.
Yeah.
That was thanks to our director Kari Skoglund and our director of photography for that episode, Martin Algren. And I love those overhead shots because I really think that it sets a mood and gives us a sense of New England. And it's funny, like if you tune in, you'll see that we come back to those shots as the series progresses, and you will see the seasons change. And oddly, they seem to line up with, which wasn't our intention, but it was a happy accident, they almost seem to line up with, thematically, with what's going on with Vic in the story.